Welcome back, and make sure you support the channel. Let's review all the resources in Civ 4. There's some resources. They can help, or they can not help as much as others, I guess. So, aluminum. If you actually get to the late game, aluminum is pretty important. I think mostly for jet fighters. I personally can live without modern armor, although that's pretty useful. And stealth bombers, I don't really build a lot of them, but, and I guess it's not that important to have either. But I think the jet fighters is the main reason that you want aluminum. Without jet fighters, it's going to be a lot more difficult to try and defend yourself from air attacks, and even launch air attacks. Although you don't necessarily need aluminum in your territory. You could use the aluminum company if you're lucky enough to found that, which a lot of the times it doesn't get founded, at least as nearly as quickly. Yeah. So if you have coal, you have a good chance of getting aluminum if you plan for it, and don't have to be communism. Maybe that is actually a big factor for you. In terms of the actual improvement, +3 and +1, that's pretty good. It's not like astounding. Well, I mean, it's pretty good. I think it's probably more than iron, right? Where's iron? Where's I? Yeah, it's more than iron. But it also comes in like pretty late in the game. A lot of the times the game is pretty much over at this point. But I guess it is a pretty big factor. If you get to this point in the game and you don't have aluminum, or maybe your rival doesn't have aluminum, that's a pretty big factor. So bananas, +2 food with plantation. Pretty good early game, I guess. It does work with a grocer, so you can get +2 healthiness with both. I mean, for the most part, you normally just prefer like corn or something, because you can also get like irrigation with that. I guess it would be more food, but bananas tend not to be very common, so you can maybe trade that, or even just the health bonuses are pretty decent. Clams, not as good as fish, basically, but you need to secure the resources for the healthiness, I guess. I'm not gonna complain if I have clams, but coal I feel like is decently important for the ironworks, though I'd probably overstate the usefulness of that. The ironworks is really only super important with a smaller country, and a lot of the times I don't even play with smaller countries. You don't even need it for railroads. You can use oil for that. I guess the main thing would be for building coal plants, which for me on Marathon, trying to get any other power source is going to take a really long time, because you have to research the tech for uranium, or it takes a really long time to get the tech for hydro plants. So if you're a country that focuses on production, getting coal and building those coal plants really early could be a big step for you, to adjusting your empire towards a lot more production. So yeah, it's pretty helpful, and again, you can use it to get aluminum if you don't have that with the aluminum company. So all in all, I think that makes it a pretty important resource for military production purposes. Not so much. I mean, I go through most games without an ironclad, so I wouldn't put too much stress on that. Copper, I mean, basically It's not as good as iron, except for the fact that you can get it early and go for an Axeman rush. That's essentially it. I mean, there's a couple buildings that use copper for double production speed. Maybe you can do something with that, but that's really its only advantage is the early advantage that it can give you, and certain buildings that maybe you can go for. Corn. Corn is good. I believe it is the same as wheat, so it's +2. Yeah, and then rice is just worse. Okay. Over corn. Yeah, so corn is good. It's probably, I mean, it's really good to see corn. I will never complain if I see corn. Cows. I actually like cows. This makes the +1, +2, that makes it a really good tile, in my opinion. Either it's a plains tile, and now it has 4 food and 2 production, or a grassland tile and 4 food, 2 production, or a plains tile with 3 food, 3 production. Those are pretty good tiles. It has a decent amount of food and a lot of production. You know, as much as a mine, without the cost in food of working a mine. Healthiness bonus with the supermarket isn't preferable, but I think that the kind of tile makes up for it. Depending on what you're doing, you may consider, and if you have multiple cow resources that you're not like trading away, you may consider changing this tile to something else. Like if you run communism, a watermill is just better later in the game than turning this into a pasture. But normally, you know, that's not too important. Crab. Again, it's the same as clams. You know, I'm not gonna complain, but I'd rather fish once I have 1 crab resource. I mean, you can trade it and whatnot. It's the same with all these, though. Deer. The issue with deer is that they're normally in tundra, and that tends to be crap land anyways, and not really to be too concerned with. Also, health bonus with the supermarket as they're building. That's too late in the game to really be helpful, so it's really only a +1 for most of the game. +2 from food is nothing stellar. You know, it's like bananas. It doesn't destroy the forest if you want to keep that, which I guess is a small bonus, but deer is not super exciting. Dye. Dye I actually think is pretty bad. Only +4 with a plantation. You can get that at least with a town. You know, if you run free speech and then you get printing press eventually, you could even run universal suffrage. A town can be infinitely better than a plantation. Theaters, I don't really build unless there's like a specific reason to build them for culture or whatnot. So I tend not to be super heavy on theaters. I mean, they're pretty cheap, so then again, if you have dye, I guess you build them for the cheap happiness that it provides. But it's not. I don't think dye is super exciting. Except, you know, like the resources with calendar tend to be rare, and on most maps, very clustered. So if you get them, you tend to get a decent number of them, and other people don't tend to get them, so you can trade them away. So there's that aspect to it. Fish, best one to see. Always happy to see it. Lots of food. Food is great. Food tiles are really great. Fur is terrible, except for the fact that it can be used with the market, but it also obsoletes, I think, with plastics, which is unfortunate, although it is pretty late in the game, so it doesn't matter too much. Only +3 with the camp, so that's pretty bad. course, camps don't destroy forests, so sometimes the tile can be better, but a lot of times it's not. Also, the beavers tend to be off in the tundra again, which is just bad land. And then this doesn't really make up for it. Gems, +1, +5. That's pretty decent for a tile. How does that compare with the other ones? Silver is +1, +4, and I think gold is also +1, +5. Oh, it's +1, +6. Okay, so gems would be middle of the tier. You want to see gold, and then silver is the worst. But I mean, this definitely isn't a bad tile. I think that they tend to be a little more rare than gold and silver, but I'm not super on top of that. Like, I don't know. But anything that helps your forge is probably a good idea. So these 3 resources are very helpful because they tend to provide a lot of happiness. Because at least I tend to build a lot of forges because production is how you do everything. You're either building buildings with production, in which case a forge is useful, or you're building units, which a forge is useful, or you are whipping, and even a forge is even useful for whipping. I guess you can do like non-productive games in which you mostly just use the gold, but production just helps you make that gold so much more. Gold, same thing, just slightly better. Hit movies comes with Hollywood. I mean, this is mostly just like a discussion on Hollywood. Hollywood is good because it gives you a bunch of resources that you're the only one who has, and then you can trade all of them. The happiness bonus, I think, is pretty boring. It's mostly the fact that the AI recognizes this as a resource that is worth something, and that goes for all 3 of these. I guess these buildings can cost different amounts. Yeah, 800, 800, and 1,000. So that means the hit movies are probably harder to get. I think it's also later. Requires radio, electricity, and mass media. I think radio comes before mass media. So, horses tend to be a pretty good tile. +2, +1, so it tends to be like, you know, better than your mines. And then you can build on the horse things. And of those, the knights, cataphracts, and conquistadors, if you got them, but cuirassiers and cavalry are all super good for waging war. I don't think that the horse archers or chariots are super important, but all these things in the middle of the game, or you know, towards the end of the game, really, but technically just the middle of the game in tech, those are all really good to have, especially the knights and the cuirassiers. I don't think the cavalry, like, you can survive without cavalry, but knights is going to be more difficult. You basically, I think it's hard to be offensive without knights. You kind of just have to like go slowly, I guess, but you can do it. So yeah, really important to have. Though I wouldn't say it makes or break you, you know. Incense, +5, so it's decent, but the building to get the extra happiness is so niche that this is really just +1 happiness, which is kind of useless. I don't like seeing incense. I think I would rather have dye, if that says anything to you. Iron, this is probably the most important resource, because without it, you can't get Swordsman, samurai, pikemen. Well, I guess a lance dash as well. Crossbows, knights, cuirassiers, cannons, frigates. The ironworks is less helpful. So these are super important. You know, if you don't have iron, your only method of protection is basically just longbows. And I don't know, I guess a mace man. And that's really rough in that era. You are gonna have a rough time if that's your case, especially if you don't have copper either. It's extremely important to be able to be offensive or even defensive in the medieval era. You know, like after the medieval era, it's not as important. But even like cannons, not being able to have cannons, I would not want to be offensive in the Renaissance era if I didn't have cannons. That would be a rough one to deal with. Okay. Ivory. And also because, sorry, going back, also because this is most of the game. You know, after cannons, it's artillery, and like by then the game is almost over. Usually. Sometimes it's not, and in that case oil is the most important, but for most of the game is going to be decided because of iron. Ivory. I mean, it can give you a really big advantage, ivory. Also helps with the market, so that's good. It tends to be a pretty bad tile. +1/+1, that's like awful. So like definitely change these after it obsoletes. But war elephants are really, really strong. And elephants aren't that common, so if you have them, you can really use this to get some advantage. They're good all the way, I guess, past when they upgrade. They upgrade to cuirassiers. So once those are on the ground, that's when they stop being good. Like you can use these with your knights, with your stack and everything. So like they don't obsolete in my mind. Marble, the less useful version of stone. I think marble is mostly used for like more of the artsy wonders. It's okay. I mean, you can try and use it for like an early oracle, but that can be kind of hard. Maybe like Parthenon, stuff like that. Great library, I think, is marble. I mean, it's nice to have, but I don't really miss it. It's so hard to build wonders on D&D anyways. So I guess there is the whole like the wonder economy where you build wonders because you have the resources to make it a lot of gold when they get built, and marble means that you can build a lot of them. So I guess there's that, but I haven't gotten super into that strat yet. So oil. I'm gonna go say that this is the second most important resource in the game, only because a lot of the game is already decided by the time you have oil. If you get into the late game and you don't have oil, that is a big problem. You can get it by the ethanol corporation, so it's not like the end of the world. Also, it's, I think, pretty easy to get the ethanol corporation if you really need it. But oil is essential to have in this time of the game. If you don't have it, you're gonna have problems. You know, no mobile artillery means that you're stuck with regular artillery, which for all intents and purposes, means no siege units. You basically have to use missiles, but you don't have the missile cruisers either, unless you have uranium. If you have uranium, you can probably survive. It's going to be an uphill battle, because if you have uranium, you can at least build, your missile cruisers and your submarines and your transports. So there's at least that. But I'll tell you, no tanks. That's rough. No mobile artillery. That would be rough. And no jet fighters would also be really rough. Especially because you can't get the mobile SAM either. you have to rely on like SAM infantry. I don't know. I'd probably still rely on just like specially upgraded mechanized infantry. So, but still, I would not want to deal with that. Pigs. Pigs are good. Lots of food. +3. That's a good tile. Not as good as corn, but still a good tile. Rice is the worst one to see, but I still don't complain if I see rice. Rice is fine. Sheep are alright. You always like seeing food resources because they're so concentrated in food that they can really give your empire a good boost. Like building farms on grassland early in the game, it doesn't have that much oomph for you. But there are better food resources to see, like pigs or one of the grains. And also, the healthiness bonus with the supermarket is too late in the game. Silk +3 is awful. But I mean, at least it has a market this time. So it's an easier way to get the happiness bonus. Silver, we've kind of been over. It's obviously the worst of the three because it only gets +4 gold. But I'm never complaining if I get silver. That's still a good tile. That's +1, +4. Oh, I'll take it. And also, extra happiness with a forge. That's good. Spices tend to be alright, because they tend to be on grassland. So then with the improvement, that puts it at 3 food for the tile. And then like a decent commerce boost. It's basically a better farm on grassland. So it's not enough food that I think it's like a great food resource. And it's not enough commerce that I think it's a great commerce resource. It's also like this split thing with happiness and healthiness, which I think makes it a little bit awkward. But, again, with all the plantations, they tend to be concentrated, and then you can maybe trade stuff away. Stone, I think, is actually like really important. It gives you access to different wonders that you can build that are really, really good, like the pyramids, or like this, the University of Sankor, or the Spiral Minaret, even the Kremlin later on. It also gives you the extra production speed on walls and castles, which I think are actually like really good for defensive purposes on deity where you have very little units, and either the castle is going to give you the extra time you need to send more units into a city to fend off an enemy attack because they're going to be busy for a long time reducing those defenses, or it's going to boost your defenses enough that you don't need the extra units. It also tends to be like a pretty good tile in terms of production, so that's actually a good bonus. You also get the railroad boost with a quarry, which I think is a nice touch. So I'm always happy to see stone. There's also the added benefit of what I talked about with marble, maybe building wonders for gold for the purpose of the wonder being completed by someone else or by you in a different city. because it can give a lot of gold, because you basically build a building at twice the speed. So instead of building wealth, you're getting twice the amount of money. So yeah, really good. Sugar. Sugar I think is kind of bad. I mean, I guess it's better than a farm early in the game, but later in the game it's a lot more boring. +1 food and then another just +1 food. That's kind of lame if you ask me. I guess it can give four food in a single tile, you know, on a grassland, and that is a decent amount of food, but it's not gonna, you know, it's nothing like pigs or corn. Bores me, I guess. And then also the split here with plantation and grocers. Those, I don't know. I guess I do tend to build them, but normally later. Like, it takes a long time to get a grocer. Uranium. I mean, if you really like nukes, it's nice. If you don't have oil, it's really important to get uranium at least. You can also build nuclear plants with it, though I basically never do. On Marathon, I think it's just like way more likely that your nuclear plant is gonna melt down. I don't think they changed the odds that you know, per turn that the plant melts down. So over a long period of time, which a marathon game is, the nuclear plant is going to melt down. It's pretty rough. So I tend to avoid them, and I always laugh at the AI when their plants melt down. It doesn't give any production boost with a mine. It only gives gold, which is bad in my opinion. I mean, I guess with a railroad it gives a little production, but you need it for nukes. And if you like nukes, I tend to think that nukes are just too expensive. Like, I can normally do the same amount with less production. Also, nukes are like really bad for diplomatic purposes. I don't know, you can get by without them, I guess. And then that's right, the SDI. People build the SDI and then it's hard to actually use them. People build bomb shelters and then it's hard to actually have your nukes be useful, and I think it's all kind of rough. So like, I'm not upset if I don't have uranium. I'm upset if I don't have oil and uranium. But oh well. Whales. Whales aren't awful. I mean, it's a resource, right? It takes a while to get. You know, you need optics. But it does give 1 extra food and some production for those ocean tiles. Makes it like a decent tile with the lighthouse. You also get the boost with the market. We like to see things that the market helps, because the market is a pretty good building. I build them in a lot of cities. So anything that helps the market is normally a sure thing. They do obsolete with combustion, I think. And that's pretty early. That normally takes into effect, so that can be tough. Wheat is good. We like seeing it. It's like corn, right? Yeah, it's like corn. It's very good. No complaints. Probably one of the best. You know, besides like the strategic resources like iron. Wine is fine. You know, it's basically where with spices. Basically spices, but with monarchy instead. Which, you know, whatever. I'll take it. It's a resource. I can trade, you know. There's at least that. Okay, so that's all the resources. Not too many, I guess. But there you go. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, or subscribe.